Hello, everybody, and welcome to another PmP end of month review. That's right, here we are in April. Another month has passed, and now it's time we look back on the PmP and see what people have submitted this week or this month. Sorry. And what is the PmP? Why, that is the Painters Motivating Painters, the Facebook group now, since our beloved Google Plus is now no longer with us. Cue Boys to Men, end of the road, but that's all right. And we go on. Our heart must go on, much like Celine Dion
Or
said.
the road goes forever onward is what was coming to my mind.
I would have also accepted that. It's a musical episode today. But I am joined by Kieran, as you can see. How you doing, buddy?
Things are lovely. There may be some cat invasions partway through our broadcast here.
That's okay.
Needs to be stalking. Trying to look for some publicity, I think.
Sure. Trying to be famous on the internet. That's the way to go.
There you go. There's your flash shot. And then out.
We just got tons more views because we put a cat in the frame. There you go. If we can somehow get a dog on screen at some point, we're really going to be going places on YouTube. So I'm excited. So we're going to jump in here. A couple quick notes up top I want to explain, and then we'll show a little bit. And I want to toss it over to Kieran to add any more. Number one, obviously not everybody from the PmP group has migrated over, but I suspect that's because some people, probably weren't as active or didn't know. We are on Facebook now. If you want to invite someone else, you can do that very easily, obviously, on Facebook. We don't mind that, as long as, they're on the hobby journey and looking to take their own next step. We welcome additional members. You don't have to have come from the past group. However, everybody who requests to join, whether through invite or requests, clicks through the link that I'll include in the bottom of this video, whatever it is, has to answer the security questions. We need to know you're not a robot, and we have to keep spam bot type stuff out. It's Facebook. It's a horrible problem. It is simply the absolute reality of the thing. So if you don't answer the questions, we are not approving you to get in. Period. No exceptions. End of story. Okay. So,
and before anyone feels oppressed by that, I want to add it is 2 questions.
That's right. We just need to know you're a human. So that's all. It's the simplest of tasks. In addition, the way that the PmP group on Facebook works is, of course, you have the normal group. It's just like any other group on Facebook. You can throw up your photos, make your pledges, post things that are done, ask for feedback, ask questions. Anything miniature related is fair game. Okay. So, if if you're working on a project and you want to do that, then then that's cool. If you want to post for this review, at the start of every month, there will be a new event created. I'll show you how to actually click into that here in a moment. But there will be a new event created. It will be called in this case, this one was called the March end of month review. Okay. If you go into the event, you can then make a post in the event. And there we would ask you to upload your photos and direct us as to what you want feedback on. That's the key. Please limit yourself to 1 post a month. As a Facebook group, it's pretty easy for this thing to get big. It'll be pretty easy for us to get overwhelmed. I'm sorry, we only have so much time. So please limit yourself to 1 post a month. We got to put a hard rule on this. If I see people posting, if I see more than 1 post, I'm going to make an executive decision and pick one to review. And I will simply remove the other ones. This is as admins, Kieran and I will make this decision. We'll pick the one we think will provide the best fodder for feedback and remove the other ones. Beyond that, feel free to post anything. The work should be finished. So we want finished work. Don't post work in progresses in there for review. Nothing like that. Okay.
Those can just go into the regular stream of PmP. Right. If you want to ask for feedback or say this is what's on the painting table, then that's just goes into regular stream stuff.
Exactly. And the reality is, which leads me to my next point, which is just because we're over on Facebook, the rules don't change, folks. This is a great community because of how we share and interact with each other, lift each other up constantly. So let's keep the positive feedback rolling. So as posts come in, I see them on my phone. I imagine if you probably do too, if you have a Facebook app or something. You can see them in your little feed notifications there. So go there, check out the posts, comment, and give people feedback. If they ask questions, try to answer them if you know the answer. And as always, be positive, share, and everybody who keeps sharing and exchanging information, that's what makes this community great, that feedback. The group is a closed group, which is how you have to be an invite, which means you can't share from out. And that's for good reason. Obviously, we have our own little walled garden of sorts here. Beyond that, I think that's everything I wanted to say. Kieran, is there anything I didn't mention here we should talk about with the new group?
I think until we get used to things, if you're a person that wants to put something up in the end of the review so it ends up on the show, will you also want to have some dialogue from the general populace? I certainly invite you to do that, but that means you'll have to post in both the mainstream as well as the event. And that's perfectly fine. I'm happy for you.
Perfectly fine. Yeah, it's actually easier here. Like one of the challenges with doing that in the old world was that then it would sort of double post and they would just kind of all appear in the feed in a very like, it would just look like you posted twice. Whereas because the event is more sequestered, it's actually, that I would highly encourage people to do that. Feel free, of course.
Good. So as we go along, the other thing about using Facebook is that you have some toggle options and settings and how you upload photos. One of those is that you could upload your photos in high def. So find your way to that if you're going to upload especially for the review, because we like the sharpest pictures are better. Then we can expand them on the screen and get a bigger visual for those that are going to watch the video. So give that a try.
Absolutely good point. Absolutely good point. Yeah. Okay. Anything else we wanna mention?
No, let's take them through a little bit of visual of how to find their way to the March review.
Sounds good. Let me yeah.
And then we'll actually launch in and do some reviews.
Sounds good. So I'm gonna go to the actual main group here. So let's go ahead and let me lock on myself and then share up. Okay. One small note problem is that, I could have some notifications pop up because of Facebook conversations. I have to. So this is a thing I realized suddenly that can happen because Messenger's embedded in here and like there's often conversations going on. So I'll try to avoid that or mute things, but here we are. At any rate, this is the PmP. You can see here. You notice right here in the top left, there's all of these things. Okay. And so right here on this one is events. You may also see like a post up here somewhere that says anything about it, which is fine. But if you can always just come here to events, we click into that, you will see the March review submissions. If we go into there, bada bing, here you are, right? And so now you're here. And just like in normal Facebook, there it is. I can make a new post. Just that easy. So,
aha, it's magic.
Nothing tricky about it. Okay.
One thing I want to explore, actually, if you want to step back one, go to the main stream for a second. I also want to add that if people just like looking at pictures of cool stuff, you can use that same sidebar and just choose photos.
Yep, that's a great point.
Okay, and run through all that stream. There'll be a way that we can, once we get loaded up on heavy and stuff like that, I'll spend some time and organize these into months as the time goes by and put them into albums. So we'll have a deeper selection of albums for you to subsect that. But yeah, I think this is going to become a wonderful repository for people to search out and look for stuff past and present.
Agreed. Absolutely. All right. So shall we begin the review?
Let us.
All right. Tell you what, do you want to take Mr. Blood Bowl Orc here and then I'll jump into the Man of Iron?
I do.
All right. So let's do it. So Blood Bowl Orc.
Okay, well this one is a long time coming. I happen to know Scott, who has posted these here, and he asked me my opinion on starting into these orcs 2 years ago. So they finally made it. Good job, Scott. You got a full team painted. Scott's a bit of a perfectionist. He goes for 100% on every model he does, and doesn't accept anything otherwise. So what he's done with these is exactly what I would have expected from him, and that is using a unique color scheme to begin with, a very bright blue, which is counteracted by a very drab kind of orc skin. It's very brown, natural looking color. There's still a fair bit of contrast in that face, obviously. It becomes the focal point of the model. And a lot of great smooth transitions through glazing, etc., that he does throughout the armor plates and the rest of the model. So that's where the compliments begin. I think that that is handled relatively flawlessly. That armor plating and the smoothness of it looks really good. The other thing, of course, that you're going to notice upon pausing for a second to look at this is all the weathering that he has taken the attention to do. And it puts these orcs into a real life feel of battered, brutal, muck-slinging orcs on the field of the Blood Bowl pitches. A lot of chipping away with brown and rust showing through in small spaces. And I think that pays off throughout that armor plates. It's really great. Spinning ahead through a couple of shots, I also want to bring attention to the sharpness that he's done with the numbers that he's put onto there. So what I want to point out here is not only has he done the numbers and framed them sharply by doing a little bit of edging to them, but he has his weathering and discoloration kind of overlap on that. And I think that's sometimes what people very often forget, is something that's painted on still is going to get distressed after the fact, unless it was just painted on this morning, right? So he pays close attention to that part of it as well when he's doing his weathering and battle-worn looks. So I think that reads really nicely. On this model, what I'm going to give a bit of a critique is I think that his little squig in his left hand gets lost in that. And maybe people at first glance didn't recognize that is a little squig in his left hand, because he's done it in a sort of a pulpy purple color that it is also very drab, but therefore it doesn't really define the shape of it as well as I think it could. So I think coming into a brighter highlight, not necessarily a blow and yoke kind of color purple, but just coming into lighter natural highlights on that, much like you did on the orc face, would have helped to define that and for people to notice that, hey, that guy's got a squeak tucked under his arm. Okay, flipping through a couple other shots, if you would, Vince. He has some other views here that we can take a look at for not just that guy, but he moves on to this overhead shot, and we get a little bit of a look of the turf. The turf, I guess, for a Blood Bowl pitch is perfectly fine. In the regular stream, if you guys want to go look at it, Scott also posted a shot of the team as a whole, and the team as a whole looks really good and striking. My critique I was going to give him about that team is that he's got some stripe markings on some of them, but otherwise, if he leaves it just bare with a couple of tufts here and there, it loses a little bit of excitement to what's going on around the model, and maybe some dismembered hands or some bones of last month's goblins are still strewn around on the base. So that's a couple of the things that I think, Scott, you could dress up the bases on this thing with to really put it into a more realistic feel. But otherwise, I think you've gained a good triumph over here. I know you took your sweet ass time doing it, but the end result is really sharp. So you should be proud of him. Good job, Scott.
Any done model is a good model. That's right. Doesn't matter how long it took, as long as it's done, that's better than not done. Always the case. All right. Great. Okay, next up, we have Adax, who has his Man of Iron. He says he's looking for some general CNC. Okay, last year at LVO, he did well in the Journeyman category, and this year he failed to place in Masters. Some tips to help him cross that threshold. Sour wells are appreciated. Okay, sounds good. All right. So, one of his questions was, is his style holding him back? Well, let's be clear. When we discuss about the style, what you're actually meaning by that is the road you took to get a place, right? That's what you mean. You mean because you're saying I got here by, this is the method I'm painting in. I'm doing this thing, then this thing. Is that holding me back? And my answer is almost always no, because the reality is there are very few wrong ways to paint. Okay, that's just not the nature of the beast. It's not about that sort of a thing. It's about where you end up at. There's lots of roads, but placing in masters is really a question of, did you take the thing to where it needed to go to be a master's level piece? And admittedly, that's often a pretty high bar. So let's talk about what we would do. Like I'll give you feedback on this guy specifically with that in mind. So understand this will be perhaps sound harsh to other viewers. I don't mean it that way, but I'm going to critique you as though, you're trying to place in the masters as you said you want to do. So that's how I'm going to give you feedback. All right. So the first thing I will say is that we need to focus more on finishing and taking this thing to really as high as it could be. So like right off the rip, the rivets aren't a different color. The little eagle on his chest isn't a different enough color. Like there's just detail we didn't pick out. Number one. Okay. Like the rivets on his orange arm and stuff like that. Everything needs to be well defined, separated, painted. No detail can go untouched, unmissed, unattention paid to if you're competing at that level. Okay. Next, I would say, right on down the line of his gun, which is where you put the two sides together, there's a big giant seam line. Got to fill that, got to shave that, got to get that gone. That's next. Like those kinds of things are absolute killers because they stand out. Let's talk about the color and the model itself. We need to actually create something that looks more varied here. So like he has a very static, singular color scheme. You have a little bit of shading underneath the lower areas there, like down here under the leg. I can see a little in here. I need more of that. I need this to get, these areas to get darker. Show me more transition in this color. Okay. And if you say, well, Vince, but I'm using this like very pale blue, which doesn't show transition well. I can't go really that dark on it. So there's not much I can do. Then my response is either one, okay, don't use that color. Doctor says it hurts when I go like this. Don't go like this. Or two, if you want to use this color, then let's make it more interesting. So when we pick out these rivets, show me some, like you already have little bits of damage and stuff around here, which need to be a little more random, a little more like this is a lot of small dots. I can see the little, you've done the light on the low side, but the light got a little too big on some of these. So we want to be a little careful on that. Make the actual scratch darker, have some thin scratches, have different lines, like cut this up a little more. Like it feels too gathered here and here. And then I have nothing like in this general area. Narratively, I assume he took some shrapnel here and this looks like a big cut across his arm or something. Cool. Show me some other things. Show me like some scratches. Scuff up his feet a little more. I can see a little bit on the side here. That's fine. What happened when he moved forward? Theoretically, scratches would be moving in this direction because he'd be stepping into things. Like think about how you scratch your shoes up, right? When we do, and then show me like weathering out of these bolts. Give me some kind of streak out of here, something like that. So break up the color. Same with the orange, same thing. Like I need stronger segmentation of the lines here to really separate these colors. I need some kind of transition in the orange. I need it to go somewhere. And then finally the metallics, where we really have this biggest need for tonal variation. I need more with the metallics than just kind of them tinted brown. So like really push these. Give me some deep shadows, give me some nice highlights, show me where light's reflecting on this gun, show me some color discoloration on the barrel, oil stains, anything like that. Okay. Now, all that sounded really, really harsh. Okay. And I don't want to crush your spirit. So I want to say this. This is a really nice piece for something I don't think you were trying to take to display quality. Okay. I actually quite like this guy. I think you nailed the box art look of what he is actually really sharply. Okay. I like your use of the colors on the lenses. I didn't mention them yet, but I think they look great. I think this headlamp here is his, sort of chest lamp, whatever this is, in his belly, looks really great. I like the scratching on the red on his knee plate, stuff like that, which, by the way, there's another way to go up to another level. Give me some more like, freehand stripes, insignias, decals, something, and then weather them. That would be another way to go. But like, I like all of that. You're going the right direction. We just need to level you up here all the way. So I gave you like the feedback on this as though, to get you in that mindset for what you want to do if you're going to go for the masters category. Okay. But that being said, I think you've absolutely got it in you. You can do it. You're showing me all the right stuff here. Your paint is smooth. Your brush control is clearly excellent. I see nothing out of place. You've got the mastery of everything you need. Now you just got to put in the time to take it the rest of the way up. So you've got all the tools. I am fully confident you can do it. I know that was long, but I really want to make sure you sort of heard how this would be judged from that perspective. So I hope that helps. Great stuff, man.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So next up, we've got Alan Thomas with the Sequitur champion here. And then we have this guy a dwarf? Yeah, little dwarf dude. Some kind of an old miner. I'm not sure. Would you like the Sequitur or would you like the dwarf? Which one would you like?
Yeah, let me look at some Stormcast. I'm glad you know what it was called, because I didn't. I was called Stormcast Girl.
Well, this is truly like I like a lot of these new sculpts. I think this is my favorite sculpt from the new range. Like, I mean, this girl is gorgeous. Like, I mean, just look at this. Like, she's so rich and like, yeah. Anyway, sorry. Sir.
You can lay it down. Okay. Well, what I was going to say is Alan put this up here because he is also one of those guys that's trying to move towards display quality stuff. So picking out individual models like this is obviously one thing that he's going to launch himself into. I think Alan was also the guy that said that he was going to paint. He has a whole series of random girl models that he just wants to get out and do a different one every week. So if I remember that rightly, this is the first of many to come. So the things that he wanted to talk about here especially was the metallics, of course, because it's a big feature on big armored models. But we're going to talk about texture on the cloth as well, and a couple other pieces. So let's start with the gold. Let's talk about that. So as with most situations of gold, the contrast is sometimes harder to get than we talk about with silver, because it just kind of moves. If you look at into a non-metallic zone, silver takes you through black, through white, and it probably has a little bit of blues or maybe a couple other colors in there in between. Whereas gold takes you through the whole spectrum of browns, and it can sometimes have green in there, and it can sometimes have purple in there, and it can sometimes have a lot of yellow in there. So you can go in a bunch of different directions with it in your color choosing when you go through your palette. Now, the positioning of the color and where the light strikes is often the first thing to tackle. And I think for the most part, you have done this fairly well, Al. The complicated spaces where it gets hard to do if you spin to the side shot from you, Vince, is where we get into that shoulder pad up on the left and some spaces on the shield, where these are the places where the dark, deep parts of the gold don't show up as well as they could. Admittedly, Alan, I've tried to do the same kind of thing with this lion emblazoned on the shield, and it's on the knee pad too, up to the front. And it's a tough one to nail because I think you got to choose a sort of an opposing line to where the lion's mane is going as your sort of crest point of where all the light's going to gather, and then you can diffuse from there. But along the way, you're going to have a lot of complicated reflections as other light points that do show up. So to speak to that a little bit, I don't think we have an overhead shot, do we? He's just got one more frame of this, I think, Vince. Yeah. Maybe that backside shot is the best to talk about it, though. So let's go from here. Let's look from here.
Sure.
So, for example, on this guy, I think I would choose that there would be a streak that comes down. If you imagine the light from what you've told us in the other view, it's sort of coming from her, if she's facing the front, or I guess from our angle that we're looking at it here, it's coming from the upper right corner and across the model that way. So you're going to have some light catches on the top folds of that lion emblazoned on the near side, and then only maybe a small bit of light catch on the very end of the shoulder plaid as it goes further away to the left. And everything else in there is going to be dark. So you've sort of mapped that in by having the recesses dark. But it's not just the recesses alone that are going to stay dark. There's some of the top edging that actually will stay that way. But then there'll be a few other glint of light points where it reflects back across the other folds that kind of come onto it. It's a really difficult thing to explain, and you know, on a small surface, it's tough to map that out as we talk about it right here. But it just is gonna continue to take careful study on that kind of thing. Now, another place looking at it from here, I think that we have universally gotten too much light onto that fist, for example, with no darkness. The collar that's right underneath the hammer haft, I think, should be much darker also, especially moving across the halfway point where it curls around. And not only is it underneath the hammer, but it's also not going to get any direct reflection because of the casting shadow of her head going backwards too, and that's going to obscure the light from attacking it. Let's go to the side angle, look at the shield again for a quick sec. Okay. Similarly on this one, again, if we've chosen that opposite side to be the light source, then obviously there's going to be some stuff reflecting from around her, from the ground, from whatever her environment is behind her. But for the sake of painting this to fit its environment and to really push the contrast of it, I think the way that I would recommend is that the darkest part, of course, will be right under her arm where she's holding the shield. The front edge would be a sharp point. And then just behind the arm, not quite at the back edge, but just behind the arm where some light finally gets to strike it, is where you would have the next feature light point. And you can just do that in a vertical way and then smooth and fudge it out, or fuzz it out, as you use the term, Alan, to go backwards and forwards from those two chosen spaces on the curvature of the shield. And then when you carry that down in the hammer, similarly, the back end of that hammer is probably where it catches the light, and the front end is darker, right? Yeah, so careful study with this kind of thing of where light strikes. It's going to be different in every situation, but the more reference material that you can view, obviously you're going to be far better off. Now, the other thing that we can quickly talk about here while we're looking at the shield is your attempt to do lightning dispersion from this kind of thing. And I think, to me, I like the idea of it, and I like that you've been, you know, multi-directional with it, and recognize that lightning still moves at a bunch of different angles. It's not a bunch of straight zigzag lines, et cetera, et cetera. So you've done that well, but I think it could be a little bit sharper, and it probably needs a little bit of flow aid in your last pass of white to get it so. And you maybe have to do a few passes to sharpen it without it getting too wide. Sometimes with these lightnings, you can play it out so you have a very diffuse sort of semi-translucent glow of the lightning that you lay down first. And then in the center of that glow is where you can put in your sharp line of the lightning, and that'll look out well. The other thing you wanted to talk about, which I want to touch on, is the tattooing that you did on the side of her head. That turned out sharp. I don't think that fuzzed out at all, and it didn't look chalky. I mean, that's obviously a little bit easier because you're doing a dark color on a pale surface rather than the other way around. So that's just the nature of paint pigments and how they work out. But I think that looks great. The thing that I might suggest as a helpful thing to really sell it as the idea of a tattoo instead of war paint is that you would take a little bit of a mid-tone or even a highlight of your flesh and glaze that over the crest of her forehead so that you still have that light gleam there, and it'll sort of set that tattoo with some depth to it so that it looks like it's underneath the skin rather than painted on top of the skin. So there's a bunch of things to think about. What else can I say here, Alan? I think on the white tabards, you've done that really smooth. So let's finish off with a frontal view again, if you could, for me, Vince. Obviously, your whites and your ivories have turned out really well here. It's all very smooth. But at distance, I think that the depth and the folds of those things could be deeper, Alan. So get out your brown washes if you want. You're going to really dilute them. You can use that to go in there, or you can make yourself a glaze of a mid-tone brown. Make sure it's warm in the same spectrum as the ivories that you've done here, and you can put that down into there because I think those folds deserve a little bit more definition, especially the underside folds on the inside of the cloak, like where it leads up into that thigh. That's certainly a place that deserves that. So there you go. I got a number of things there that I hope offers you some step up things. The most of it is just studying metallics like the rest of us are doing and putting in the hours of repetition and playing around with it and moving the paint until it feels good.
Yeah, always challenging. Always challenging. I will say, you may want to look at a recent video I did about shading true metallic metals revisited. There's a technique in there that can be very useful with gold. I actually do it in the video with like sort of a bronze color, but all the things I talk about would apply to gold as well. That might help. So there you go.
Right, good.
All right, let's talk about this dwarf. So Daniel says it's his first time painting resin. He used some foam material on the cloak and a stipple technique on the hat and shirt to create a fabric look. Also his first time using pigment. Cast is a bit messy, so he says next time he should avoid using washes. Okay. I would agree. Or let me say it this way. You need to be a little more careful with your washes is what my answer is. So because I understand what you were going for here with this guy, but what we actually get then is the coffee staining of the wash, and it's overwhelming what I think you intended. So you can see where like washes over a large flat, especially when applied kind of like a wash, like a traditional wash, are going to leave these coffee stains here where you had too much wash build up here, all this stuff. Whereas if you had just taken it and instead of applying it like a wash, apply it like a glaze, that is to say, don't use it, don't keep any extra, just literally run a nice smooth coat over it. You probably could have had a little more success. Now, what I'll also say is the stippling technique on the leather is a good instinct. So I like where your head's at there. I think you just need to be a little heavier with it because, like, I don't really see where it was, but I don't know if the foam is the right answer. Take a nice, garbage brush that's thick and sort of, worn down, or just a big brush like a size 6 or 8 or something that's synthetic, and just start stabbing the crap out of this thing with like some ivory, and then do some dark color and stuff like that, and then run your thin browns over it. You can use like a Seraphim Sepia or an Agrax or some combination, or actual paint or brown ink or anything like that. And then when you do that multiple times, you'll kind of bring it together. Now, my other thought is you probably then want to think about how this leather would actually wear. It's going to wear more toward edges, right? So here on the cloak, we should see more scratches and hashes and stuff like that, where the leather has been chewed. And like the sculptor realized this because you can see how the lower part has these nicks and stuff out of it, right? Where the coat would have got caught on things, drug along rocks, and so on and so forth. Okay. Now that for a figure that's more or less in a bunch of leather, you did do a good job of separating them out. So I want to take a moment to recognize that, because you have a nice sort of gray colored hat, this a very, very light ochre brown coat, and then the dark leather for this, and the even darker for the boots. So your instinct there is good. This figure is never going to be super exciting because it's kind of a guy in a cloak who's just wearing a bunch of leather, but I think you did a good job with it. The stone on the hammer, I want to call that out. That looks quite nice. I like the edges that you did there. The shadows look pretty good. I think that's well done. You could probably do, I think if you want to make that even better, you could have a couple little small micro scratches and hashes and stipples in there of little lighter specks of color and stuff like that. Take some ivory and just kind of very lightly stipple it in some places and then wash over it. Just little things like that to make the rock look a little more rock. Finally, the on the beard is the last thing I want to talk about. So you've got a nice buildup here where we've collected the shadow up near the lip. So that's very good. I think you probably want to then focus even some more highlight out here where it gets out from under the hat. Like this guy would have even more pronounced shadows than we would normally see on like our traditional dwarf beard models, just because, he's wearing this big hat. It's going to cast a shadow down to about like here. But then theoretically some area like this is going to be even more exposed. So a little white, in here and stuff like that or here to really like, really to really give the impression that there's some bright light here that's reflecting and catching on the edge of the hairs of the gray beard. So beyond that, I would look at like some little micro scratches and hashes and things like the ring around the edge of his coat and the leather bag, especially where he'd be grabbing it and the edges would be getting scratched. So like just little tiny hashes that go like this, ultra thin brush, some flow improver and stuff like that. Little hashes around the edge where he's set it down on table as he gets home from a long day and, puts down his thing with his reading book in it or whatever this happens to have in it. So, there you go.
Yeah, he's given it a real gritty feel throughout. And I do appreciate that. Sometimes when you have all these natural surfaces with not a lot of blasty flash color.
Yeah.
Tough to make it interesting, but I think he's done that.
I agree. Yeah, I agree. And I think one other thing to mention very quickly, he mentioned that like this is sort of his first time using pigments or whatnot. Yeah, I think that worked perfectly fine. I don't see any issue there. I think the pigments well applied. Yeah, you're good on the pigment. So well done. Okay. So next up, Tristan, we did during the end of last month's review. So we're not skipping him, but we did do it. So Tristan actually showed up in the February review.
Yeah, we got him there. I remember
that. So that brings us up to Sergey, who brings us a big Skull Reaper standard bearer guy, and John McCarthy. He has some new Night Titans for us. I don't think I need to tell you which one I would rather do, but I'll ask you, Kieran, which one you'd like to do.
Yeah, you get to talk about robots. That's fine.
Okay, great. The corn guy's all yours then.
Okay, Sergey. So this fella you've done in a very striking way. In the feedback that you put on here, or the guidance that you put here, I should say, you were worried about some kind of visual confusion on this. You wanted to think about color choice, how you've laid this out here, and what you can improve on. The other thing that you did express is you're not a big fan of battle damage on armor or blood drips and things like that, like most corn guys are. So I like you better already, is what I'll say about that. Because I'm not generally a fan of that kind of stuff either. I think you can do interesting things throughout. Now, I guess I'll open up by saying, I think I get what you're saying. about the visual confusion of this. And I think that comes out of the numerous facets that are going on all this guy's gold and brass space, right? There's all kinds of little pokey bits. There's deep cuts and hashes, which you've really accentuated very heavily. There's, banding that goes down the staff with spikes on those, and several different points of light catching on his greaves and armor frame as well. So I think that's where the light confusion happens. Partly because it's tough to understand what's separation. I think I have difficulty with this because I think you've done a great job of doing those highlights without them being too harsh. Like your actual brush control and the smoothness of transition is actually really good. But I wonder if you would just under accentuate some parts and not go all the way full highlight on every single one. I think that might be the way to take away some of this visual confusion. So here's what I mean by this. So like we talked about in the last piece, where with golds, you can sort of step into purple or yellow or even green, and you step towards the green spectrum in this kind of thing because it plays off really well against the red. So in that, in itself is a great choice. But you come to a yellowy point at its very height and very close to white in some places. But that's in a lot of places that you come to that white. And I think if you just chose to stop a little bit sooner on some of the places that wouldn't reflect as sharply, I think that would take away some of the visual confusion. And it's tough for me to critique that, Sergey, because I think that you've done it pretty masterfully here. But as an overall piece, I think that's what I keep falling back to as the potential for the trouble with visual confusion, as you described it. But turning away from that, I do certainly want to compliment you in all the smoothness of your brushstrokes here. The skin tone on this guy is very, very deep and characterful. The highlights that you get across the cheekbones and the nose, the hands are so very well defined, and you got striated muscle on this guy's hulking pectoral muscles as well. I think that's all tremendously done. So you got to take away a big triumph in that. The armor also done very, very smoothly. We got light catching in a couple of places. He's got one particular dark space in armor, and that's on the sort of left shoulder as it's curling away from his body, and a couple of things on the leg greaves. But I think the light catches are all in the right place in here. You've done some great definition on that emblazoned in the center of him, and even the smoothness on the bone spikes and the skulls that are on the base. I think that all comes together really good. The one thing that isn't overwhelming because of the choice that you made on it, because you've done a bit of a muted purple on this tabard that drapes between them. It doesn't come as a in-your-face kind of purple, but it is, once you do move around the model, I find that my eye itself sort of does keep coming back to that once I discover it. It isn't the first thing I discover when I look at it, but it ends up coming there. So I was trying to think of a couple of different spaces where maybe you could, if you wanted to use that third color, to maybe push it a little bit more. And it could be done in the banding of both his staff and his axe. It doesn't have to be the same color purple, of course, because it's a different fabric, leather wrappings versus these draping tabards. But it could be closer to it so that you still have that triangulation idea going on in the model for a composition perspective. But let's give the folks, I think he's got one more shot for us to have a look at here. One more frame. We may as well take a peek at that while we're at it. Just where he spins the angle and sees it head on. Yeah, I think I love everything about this. And now that we see it from this angle as well, you can tell that in his spaces where he's moved to darken the red, he's actually gone into using some blue in that to shade it down, which is a very smart move if it's done subtly to shade that red. I think that's fantastically done without going into black and flattening out the color too much. So I think it's a really good piece. And I hope I've spoken enough about that visual confusion idea. If it makes sense to you at home, if there's a way to back off on it a little bit on the number of sharp points, I think that's the suggestion that I would leave you with. Lovely stuff though, Sergey. Lots of good things to take away from here.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you on everything you said, Kieran. I think part of it is just this is a tough model, right? I mean, like this guy is such a riot of stuff going on. You know what I mean? Like that's not any judgment on Sergey. I think this model is just it's so busy, right? Like there's just so much going on that it's tough to navigate. I actually commend him for doing, frankly, as well as you could. You know what I mean? Because this thing's just easy to get lost in. So, yep, I agree. Okay. All righty. Let's talk about robots.
Oh boy.
All right, John McCarthy. Here we go. Bring on the robots. So we have some very weathered, rusty, crusty robot goodness here. I'm assuming these are chaos robots because of the Nurgle thing here and the horns and stuff. Either that or these guys have been in a long, very weird campaign. So let's talk about Nurgle robots. Yeah, I think this is great. I mean, let me just start there. I love everything about these dudes. Like a lot. So we'll start here with this one. The rusting pattern on the carapace and on the white is wonderful. It's organic. It's random. It's speckled. I dig it. I dig the heck out of it. You do it unevenly and everywhere. I like that very much. One small point on it is you may want to think about going back and then like kind of low edging just some of these points with come up into a slightly brighter cream. You would need to do it strong, just a tiny little line around some of this just to kind of show where it's a little bit of a light catch. Could kind of help pop that out a little bit. One thing I would say is if there had been some more like freehand or decals or something that were then scratched and roughed, I might like some of that a little better. But I do really like your conversions. Like I like all the adding the bell down here where there's normally or not bell, but whatever this thing is, the standard where there's normally the tabard, and adding the Nurgle symbols on the shoulders. I think those work really, really well. So to that degree, like no shade, that looks great. The rust on the steel looks really nice. I'd honestly like to see you go a little farther on that to separate it. One of the problems is we've kind of muted out so much of the color because he's so rusted. And you've got a lot of steel on here, so that's an opportunity to explore. Steel rust can be very red, very orange. You've got a super muted green. Let's work in some super muted red rust. So we could have some like kind of red dots and stipples and pigment worked in here, or into some of this steel around here that's rusting, some of like something like that. You could have a little red orange rust worked in on some of the edges or something like that, just to really, get that. And again, I'm not talking about like putting Christmas red on here, right? Or a crimson or something, because we're not trying to make a Christmas tree, but some very subdued rust red would then very nicely counter the subdued green you have and really make it pop out. So that's just something that kind of occurred to me as I was looking at this guy. Same thing like back here. That's what I noticed. Like there's a lot of just sort of big steel that's kind of, it's not as interesting in its weathering as what you did on the carapaces, which is like really top notch, great stuff. And I like it. I mean, your conversions on all these are wonderful. And by the way, you clearly have the right idea on how to use red pigment, because I can see it in the bases. And, the number of times that I have like had to talk on this review show about people who just do gray rocks. And I say, get some color in there, get some greens, get some different things on, get some red pigment where there's rust and iron in there. And John, you made my day. I really want you to know that, because look at all this wonderful irony earth red pigment scattered in there. It's fantastic. Very natural. Your tufts have some wearing and tearing and wash like to them to get them more integrated into the ground, or you mixed pigment into them, or whatever you happen to do. It works. You broke up. None of it looks directly like cork. I assume there's probably cork under there somewhere. It looks like that's what you used, but it's been very well disguised. So perfect. Like the fact that I had to sit there and even question my assumption tells me you nailed it. So all that's good. I like the horns over here. Good transition, good lines. I think that all looks nice. Yeah, what I would say is on your steel rust, go farther. Given the advanced state of weathering, that's the part where I feel like you could take it even to the next level. I would also say that on white like this, the coolest looking thing is when you have streaks coming down, where out of rivets and from these big rust patches, you get streaks that run down. So doing some streaking, whether that's through like, an oil wash streaking, or whether that's some AK interactive streaking grime, or, pick your poison. There's 100 different ways to do streaks. I would absolutely love that. That would have been what brings it all the way home for me. Especially if you then used a little bit of an orange sepia streak. But on the whole, these guys are fantastic. So much character. The weathering is top notch. They are Nurgle Knights if I've ever seen them, man. These are some Death Guard type of knights. I dig them. Conversions are great. Lots of small touches. Molto bene. Beautiful basing. I can't leave that. I really want to. Have I driven that home enough, Kieran?
Yeah, you have, I think.
Okay, good.
But I mean, it's well deserved. John's put a lot of character into these three fellas, so it's well deserved.
Yes, people, work reds into your base, or into your rock, or greens, or purples, or browns, or all of the above. Mm-hmm. Don't be shy. All right. So next up, let's see. We have a reactor, and we've got a little lizard fellow. Tell you what, in fact, that's so funny. I was just saying that, and then I read, he said this little fella. That's pretty funny. Okay. How about I just keep rolling on weathered metal, and I take the reactor? Is that all right?
Okay.
All
You're
right.
on the roll.
Just keep rolling through.
No.
What's that?
There's no base on this one, so you'll have to use your own imagination.
Sure. And I get it. This is a terrain piece, so I'm okay with it. Yeah, I mean, and so we'll review it as such as well. I think it looks good. So I like your little bits of streaks here. The inner fire and the little boiler thing, that looks really nice. Little plasma coils, that looks really nice. On the whole, I think my feedback here is going to be previous thing I said about metal weathering that I just banged on about for several minutes, because I think several of those things apply here too. But what I'll say is the biggest thing that jumps out to me in this one is we still want to make sure we have all the little details picked out. So what I notice is that there's not a lot of discoloration around the rivets. That always jumps out at me. These things are a nightmare of rivets. So like there's a bunch of rivets here and here and here and here and here and here. Look at all these rivets. So like touching each one of those with a little drop of like wash or ink or something is good. Rusting out some of the rivets, just put some brown around some of them, touch a couple of them with orange, put some tiny rust spots and things, have some streaks running out from things like tubes here where there might be a leak, or out from a pipe, right? Where joints don't fit perfectly and there tends to be tiny leaks over time of grease or grime or anything like that. That can be your next steps to really take this up. But I mean, for the most part, what I do really like here is you used very muted colors, strong discolorations on the thing. But yeah, you contrast it with these nice plasma glows that this thing's clearly a reactor with a lot of power in it, which I really enjoy. So all in all, I think it's I like your nice chipping and stuff like that. I would love to see a little more of this going on the paint on this thing, honestly. Not crazy, but just a few more little spots of it. But on the whole, yeah, it's very well done. It's cool.
Yeah, what I thought was really cool about this is he got his color in there with his plasma coils, as you said.
Yeah.
and then, you know, found some places to put red in the boiler along the tube as well. So despite the fact that it's a big chunk of metal and could look very boring on a field, he's found ways to put some
really make it interesting. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
Like this is a great example of how to work very subtle colors into things. Yeah, it's great, Adam. All right, Lizard Fella.
So we're going to go look at this piece by Juan Francisco Gonzalez Hidalgo. I appreciate these Spanish fellows who are members of our PmP and all the painting world who have who just routinely go by all of their names.
Like that is such a cool name. Yeah, like way cooler than anything I would ever be or do. Yeah, just that name alone makes him cooler than me.
Yeah, you're gonna have to find more surnames.
Seriously.
Okay. Anyway, so looking at this glorious skink priest, I think the features that you're going to look at probably first off is the feathers, and then you're going to wander around a little bit, and you're going to find your way to the jade staff, and probably the crest on the top of this guy's head, because there's a lot of colors going on in this thing, and it's a tiny model to fit it all in. And I think that the way that you've masterfully sort of pulled it together on a small space, there's so many positives about this that I'm going to have to nitpick to find some negatives to pick out on. So let's do that, because you directly asked about the jade staff, and you were pretty pleased with how it went, but still feel that there's ways to improve on it. And I'm going to agree. I think that the center and the core of that jade staff, you chose the right tones of blues and greens to really make that happen. And the brush strokes are very smooth. There's no visible brush stroke on there to complain about or pick out. And you have hit the right approach by doing the light beam coming in through that white dot and then dispersing and dissipating on the way out the back. Jade is not your typical gemstone that always shines through the same way, and that's why it's sort of a softer diffusion of it, and stays a little bit darker throughout most of the surface area, but still finds a way to catch some light points. Now, I think that when I was looking at this and trying to analyze what you would do to improve upon it, I think the thing that occurred to me, not immediately, but I had to look at it for a little bit, is how the light behaves on the top tines of this that are facing nearest the sky. And I kind of feel that the gleam, because of the way that this is reflecting and that kind of thing, I think that your highlights through the surface of the jade stone needs to move towards the root of each of those little triangular spikes that are on there, much in the same way that it happens on that bulb that's in the center, right? Again, it's a tiny surface area, but when we're getting down to the nitpicky part of it, what I mean is the way that we look at it here is you start with a white dot at the very peak of that triangular spike, and then it's your highlight color. It's brighter up there than, and I guess I'm saying flip it around, it should be the opposite. It should be brighter at the root where the light has gone in and it's capturing, it's refracting around, much in the same way as it is in your bulb. So I think that for me is the only subtlety that I would say that you could improve upon. There's maybe a little bit of confusion where you have too many light points on the center ring as well, the ring that goes around that bulb in the middle, especially on the bottom side where you've put your white highlight on each of the 3 points of those triangles. I think that it does reflect and bounce around a little bit, but I don't know it would be as visually blasting around as it is there. Probably less highlight points would make it driven home. I like that you've backed off a little bit of that on the top ring, and that feels a little bit better to me than the bottom ring. Now, let's talk about some other real positives on here. You've taken the time to really go in and pick out depth and definition in those feathers, which I think is wonderful. You know, going to deep orange at the root of it, and coming to a sharp yellow. And you've been so very careful with how you've done the green color touches on there as well. I think that's all super great. The smoothness of your application on the flesh of this guy is also good. I have no complaints there. I also think it's positive how you've done a very rich gold on his staff. Gone into silver for the highlights, so you know it's a very rich jeweled gold. And you've put some character in this guy's face. I think there's one other thing that I would move to improvements / tips about is the purple feathers that appear underneath that staff versus the red crest that goes over top of this guy's head are the two things that kind of oppose one another a little bit. And I think that this is one of those sort of model composition things that we need to contend with. I mean, when we look at the center of the model in that pale blue, he's reaching out in different directions, so you can follow that. That makes sense. The green appears on the jade staff. It appears on the feather tips. It appears on the groundwork. So that makes sense, and it moves you around. But this hot red on the crest is probably the part that I would keep, but then I would have to find, I would like to take those feathers underneath there into red as well, so that you don't have one extra color that's causing a little bit of confusion and keeping you centered on something that isn't necessary to keep you centered on. At this point, Vince, let's flip to the next frame that he's got. And we see the back end of this. So even on this one, without the purple there, I think I feel better about it. You know, I guess in my mind, having seen skinks on the battlefield in many Ninth Age and Warhammer games, it makes sense that their crest is very different, and they can mark them out when they look at them as a unit. So that's okay. Yeah, it's just that purple feathering. I think that I would knock out of there and move it into the red spectrum to give it a counterbalance. But a tremendous piece. I think that you've achieved some great things here. The jade staff is a feature, and I think you just about nailed it as perfectly as you could. So thank you, Juan Francisco Gonzalez Hidalgo, for sharing with us.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's I think from now on, whenever Juan Francisco Gonzalez Hidalgo shares this, we must say his entire name too, because it's a great name.
Yeah.
All right.
Able to do that.
So next up we have oh yes, this is Fulcrum's back with us again, and he has a big old X-wing kit. Nice. And then surface tension. Brings us Mephiston. Okay, cool. Would you like the Star Wars thing or the other space wizard thing? Which space wizard thing do you want?
I'm kind of curious to look at this X-wing piece.
All right, we'll let you keep rolling then. Let's jump in. Here we go. He's got a ton of photos too. Oh my goodness, he has not spoiled us for photo, or not given us a lack of photos. Sorry.
No, well, this is another one of those weathering things that we can talk about. So we're kind of rich in that sort of subject matter today. Now, what I didn't get the sense of, because of the way that he's photographed this, is if this is, a few inches big scale model, or if this is one of those little mini 2-inch big X-wing board game models.
I think it's a little bigger, but he said it's 1/72nd scale, whatever that boils down to. I don't know.
Okay. So it'd probably be about 6 inches in size then. Okay. Well, for that matter, I think I'm pretty convinced. Like when you first glance at this thing and feel about the realism of it, and think back about nostalgically how you watch these things happen in the films, I'm sold. Like it looks like the real thing. The scuffing, the burn marks, the scrapes on the nose, all comes together. You may as well flip through a bunch of photos because he's got plenty of them. You may as well flip through as we're talking, and if there's any in particular I want to stop you on, I'll do so. Yeah, all this sort of panel coloring. He's gone and weathered and done some chipping on those things. This kind of stuff doesn't capture dirt and grime in the same way that stuff in an earthly place does, because these are effectively just going from hanger to hanger. They come in and out of atmospheres and get burned and scorched from that kind of heat distribution. Paint obviously through heat chips away and peels away, but it doesn't necessarily rust. So I think that the coloration of this thing is a bit of a challenge in that way, in that how do you do color variation on something that is just predominantly a white painted spaceship? But I think he does do that in a few spaces. Obviously on these engine blocks that we see back here is where he does a lot of his dusting. And that's really all it should be, is dusting. It's a little heavier around the back. And then he's gone with this hot pink glow of engine flare on the back end there, which is intriguing. I guess this comes down to a matter of imagination. I always imagined them being sort of, that typical blue plasma. I'm trying to think back now and thinking to watching the films if they did turn out that color or if they were red or orange or something.
I legitimately do not remember. I thought they were orange on the back of X-Wings and blue on the plaque of the Imperial vehicles, but who knows?
Yeah, whatever. This is not to say that that's wrong, because I mean, you get to do what you want to do.
Yeah.
But Fulcrum, when we talk about this, from an artistic perspective now, if we're going to shift it to there and talk about it there, then we're into that whole discussion about color triangulation again, and where does your eye follow? I mean, you only see this from one angle, but orange would fit in better with your red and your yellow that you're doing on these things. Unless you did your little R2 unit in a maybe glowing pink up there. That could be cool. Or if you had the laser tines heating up, that could be another cool thing to add to this model too. If you had the laser prongs, what are the?
Oh yeah, I don't know. Yeah, the guns.
The guns.
You mean those things? Yes.
The prongs, yeah. I want to call them the prongs, but that doesn't seem. I feel that those are places that could be weathered as well, because obviously that's a place where, energy accumulates, and there's a lot of sort of fusion and diffusion that's going on around there. So rather than them be the same color as the rest, again, this is just feelings about what could potentially be other points of sort of, what's the word I'm looking for? Not distress.
Oh, just sort of variation. Yeah, I mean, and yeah, and what I'll say is, what's neat is you can actually go. This isn't. I mean, I'm trying to think of how I want to say this. The quote unquote real version of this is a model that somebody weathered and painted, right? Because the actual miniature painters who did the original, small scale models for the movie did that. Like, they weathered these things. So you can they weathered their own models and stuff, right? That they made. So you can actually go back and look at their pieces. Cause all of those images are online. So you can actually go see what they did. Not in the movie, because in the movie, then now, especially unless you have unless you're one of the magical few with one of the original editions, they've all been touched up and stuff, but you can still find pictures of the original work online. And so, that could be a really good reference for you.
And I'm sure he did that for some of this.
Yeah. Yeah.
What's the best shot? Let's flip ahead a couple of frames here. He's got one. He's got a great shot of it straight head on.
Okay. Right there?
Yeah. So this one, you can really feel the richness of that sort of dirty brown, oily discoloration that he's got coming from the muzzle and streaking backwards, right?
Yep.
I think that's really subtly done, but it feels so appropriate. He's even got some of the yellow color that he's framed around the cockpit. It's fading out. Instead of chipping away, it's actually just fading away, because that's where all the intake is for the engines right in
Right.
front. So I think that's a really good touch and a subtlety that can be missed easily. So yeah, I think that's great. Yeah, I think I want to be careful here because I don't want to go into an area that doesn't feel real for you because you imagine Star Wars in a different way than some of us potentially. But yeah, just as an artistic sort of composition thing, I think the only thing that I have to critique you on this thing is, the engine flares and the possibility of another kind of color touch that would go up on the lasers, on the laser prongs of this thing. But otherwise, I really do appreciate the subtlety of your weathering on here, and little touches of oil streaking, paint chipping, etc. I think that's really well done. As a final thing, I wonder, did he give us a shot that gets in tight on the cockpit so you can see the figure inside?
Let's find out.
But
Oh, neat. There. That's cool.
people,
That's the thing all folded up and everything. That's kind of cool.
yeah,
Oh, and then the individual pieces. I think is this. There's the original, obviously. I don't. Nope. Unfortunately, I think that little one with just the disassembled main body, I think, is the best shot of the pilot we get.
Yeah, no, that's a good nod to the fact that he's done that detailing on the inside of the cockpit too, though. That's quite cool that he's gone in to do that detail.
Yeah.
We can see the whole right from original, right from out of the box. Yeah, it's a cool project, man. Certainly good DMP so that we can all kind of lavish and look at a different style that we're used to.
Absolutely. But, I love when people share stuff like this that we don't normally get. It's great. All right. Rock on. So next up, surface tension with Mephiston, Chief Librarian of the Blood Angels and Keeper of the Holy Space Cricket Bat. Okay, so let's see. He went for maximum effort. Okay. He found the following to be the most challenging. All right, so his OSL, his skin tone, okay, and the freehand. Okay, cool. So let's take a look. All right. All right, so we've got a couple different sources of OSL, namely the little candle lights that are down there. You can see them casting light about as well as onto the figure itself, in this area here, and up onto the skull and such. We've got the glowing sort of plasma pistol here that he's got. And then he mentioned the skin tone. And let's take a look and the freehand like brocade pattern here on the cloak. So let's kind of go through each of these in turn. Oh, nice. He gives us some good close-ups there. Cool.
They framed it up nice for you. Yeah.
Absolutely.
We appreciate that, everybody. That's
absolutely. Absolutely. All right. So let's start at the beginning with kind of the overall quick feedback, and then I'll get into the stuff you wanted to talk about. So composition of the piece, I like it a lot. Silver metal is a good choice. Contrast wet, like it provides nice cold edging and circulation to all the to the extreme warmth of this piece, between the crimson of his cloak and armor, the orange of his wings, the fire of his plasma gun, and the candles. It is a very warm piece, which makes sense for the Blood Angels, of course. So the choice to use the cold steel as opposed to like trying to go gold or something was very wise, because that would have just overwhelmed the piece with warmth. You used it, and even your gold, you went for a colder gold, which I think again was a good choice. So like when we look here, there's a little more, it's a little less of the warm yellow tone in it, more pushed into the white and browns and stuff like that. So all that's smart choices. Now, as to the wings, I think the wings look good. Colors. Sorry, I had to sneeze. Color is very appropriate. I like the little hashes. I think you did good of catching the shadows on the inside here. Maybe a little pushing the light to the edge of the wings even a little farther, especially on the top here. Some like hashes of light might counterbalance the light on the bases a little bit better. So that's something that occurs to me. Now, as to the OSL, I think that's a real strength of this piece. So like, let's zoom ahead here to where he had that little OSL shot. I think this is actually well captured. You notice he put his reflection lines in line with the candle. He kind of warmed up and made the direct point of the light is still pretty white because light on metal is still going to have a white reflection point. But then the rest of it is going to be light pollution, which is what he's captured here in this nice yellow tone. So I think that works and sells really well. Looking at the rich red of the cloak, I think it looks nice there as also. I might have cast this area here in a little bit deeper shadow because it's kind of, more hidden away. But this really sells a very sort of satin cloak. And I think that, overall he feels very, he does feel very space vampire-y. So, on that regard, you nailed it. Obviously, your non-metallic metal is quite sharp throughout this whole thing. I don't really have any feedback for you there. I think your NMM game is strong. You don't need any, you don't need my feedback on that one. I very much like the OSL casting down on the stone. I think that's where it really sells. So OSL, I'm saying absolutely, you're nailing it. The plasma gun also looks very nice. Now, of course, as per usual, the light casts out maybe a little farther than it normally would, but that's all for artistic impression and license. And it's a pretty normal thing with plasma guns. And frankly, I'm okay with it. It like, if it were 2D art, we would just fuzz this whole area up here in the air around the gun to sell it. But like, you can't paint the air. So we've got to lie a little and put a little more on the gun than we might otherwise. And I'm okay with that. The skin tone I do find challenging. It's you went for this very pinky purple. It has a very strange, almost ashy look to it. Yes, it does feel a bit vampiric. I feel like what we actually need is just some deeper shadows and some higher highlights. Like, kind of the problem is his face is universally highlighted, whereas I'd love to see a little bit more along like his nose and chin and cheeks, stuff like that. So that's kind of the area I think we could up that a little bit. Now, let's see. What was the last one? I'm sorry. The last thing he wanted me to talk about was, what was the last thing? Oh, the freehand on the cloak. Yes, of course. Sorry. I apologize. So let's spin around to that. Yeah, great. I have zero issues with the freehand on this cloak. I think it is a perfectly great choice and works wonderfully, and it's executed wonderfully. Again, the color reads as very, very silk, very satin on the cloak. I think that doing a very random, sort of just pseudo pattern like this, it's very subtle, is wonderful for this sort of miniature. So I think you absolutely nailed it. If you're, so now that you did this surface, we got to take it to the next level, which means we got to lay like some kind of Blood Angels freehand symbol right here in the cloak, like take the wings with a blood drop and paint a new one of those right here. That's your next challenge over. So start layering your freehand on top of each other. Okay. But overall, this piece is an absolute success. It's a triumph. I really like it, man. It looks absolutely wonderful. It's great. Yeah, and you're definitely right. This guy could use a new sculpt. So for an old piece, you really turned like, this guy looks better than he deserves to.
That's a subtle dig at you, Blood Angel folks. Yeah, I'm really impressed by this guy's OSL. As you said, down on the capture on the base is where I saw it the best. And his mastery of metallics is very smooth, ultimately smooth, really great.
Yep. Okay. All right.
Let's move on to the last couple.
Yes, indeed. I think we got, 2 left. Would you like the Kill Team guys or these guys?
Well, I'll tell you what. I will talk a little bit more about Juan Francisco's second entry here.
Oh, yeah. He's breaking the rules, but that's okay. He didn't know the rules yet. So
yeah, he didn't know the rules.
Now you know the rules.
You can finish up before break about that Space Marine squad.
That sounds good.
Yeah. Okay. So let's talk about that for a second. So ideally, what we would like for all those watching at home, including Juan Francisco Gonzalez Hidalgo, is we'd like you to choose one thing that you really want to have a dig at to get deep into. So we did that with the skink. The remainder, of course, we certainly encourage you to put into the regular stream and ask questions about that and get your feedback, etc. But I guess in passing, we'll touch on a couple things that you made mention of here, and at the same time,
take our own props. And that is that he says that he took these to a dead ball tournament. No, not dead ball. Dead zone tournament, which is a Mantic game. And I won the best painted crew with this group, even though he says he wasn't entirely happy with the finishing job of them. So we, as a PmP group, of course, are going to take partial credit for that, because all of our members' wins are wins for the group as a whole. So thank you for that, Mr. Gonzalez Hidalgo. We'll take solace in that. I think you've done a pretty good job, and your smoothness of paint control is exhibited just as well here as it was on your skink, even though I know well enough that these Mantic models are not necessarily the sharpest of sculpts, and you have to be sort of very purposeful about where you lay your paint. You can't let the models do the work for you as much as you can with some other sharper sculpt jobs. So that's tremendous. Well done here. But the last thing that we'll quickly touch on before we move on is he gave us a close-up of some headband work that he did on the leader here. If you can find us that snapshot, Vince. Here we go. So if you look in real close on a super tiny model, the little symbol on her headband there, that's tight to get into. I'm glad that you feel good about doing this, but from seeing your prior work, I'm not really that surprised. In truth, I think that's probably something with your brush control that you've exhibited elsewhere is something that you can probably achieve routinely as long as you do it more. So that's part of the process. Is if that felt really good, hopefully you'd be encouraged to do more sort of sharp touches and highlights on places like this. So good show, Mr. Juan Francisco Gonzalez Hidalgo. And we'll look forward to next month where we'll see your best works.
Agreed. All right. So we'll close out our pre-intermission review here with a look at a Space Marine kill team. So this is from Dejan, who's given us a little work in progress, also breaking the rules, finished only, but again, you didn't know the rules yet, so we'll let you slide this time. Okay. So he said he's, basically looking for feedback as he goes up here. So my feedback to you is mainly going to be along the line of something that I've given, many, many times in this review. And that's going to be in the area of tonal variation. Here we have the black and the red. The red has a little bit better. It's doing a little better as far as its variation goes. We've got some shadows hidden away here. But I'm trying to find, there you go. This will be a nice place. It'll show it off. We've got to do some work with the black here. So much of these minis, they're just black, and that's kind of it. There's like this whole area here is just black. I've got no edges, because you went black. I don't really have much in the way of highlights or going to a lighter color. Like maybe there's a little bit of gray here or here, but it's so very minimal that I really can't see much of it. Maybe you're doing a little bit here. It's kind of hard to tell. And that's my whole point, right? I need a little more. So, my statement to you would be, let's push this black a little more. I have a video on painting black armor. There's a lot of good videos on painting black armor out there. You got two choices, basically. We can push up into some higher highlights and create some light here to amplify what you can see happening with this light normally, where so we'd create some light source here on the edge, and then we'd kind of really deepen this down. So this should be like black gray. This should be like gray gray. This should be black black right here. So we have just this. If only 50% of a thing needs to be black for a thing to read as black to the human eye. So that's what I would say. And in a similar way, when we get to the red, make sure you again cut these edges out. Get these you have vents and stuff here. You have rivets. Line these things, get them, get the coloration in here, that kind of stuff happening. Now, the last thing I noticed that I want to comment on was with the shoulder pads here, where we have you're doing some nice freehand symbols. So A+, way to go. Painting bravely, I dig that. Where I can see here is that we tried to put white paint straight over black paint. and that didn't work well. So because like I can see it splotchy, I can see the chalkiness of it, I can see where the black is showing through. Your much better bet here, if you want to do something like this, take a nice smooth mid-tone gray, draw this symbol out, right, and then layer some smoother near white over it very carefully with a sharp brush, and then you're basically just tracing your previous work. Okay. Your color will look much smoother, much fuller. That also gives you a chance to correct. Like this guy has sort of a gimpy wing on the underside because of how his arm is bent. You could, bring that back out. And the best part about it is like half of freehand is unpainting your freehand. So like you can see where you've got some things that kind of went a little off here. Cool. No big deal. That happens all the time to everybody. Just take some black and go back in and retrace your edge line to get it really sharp. Right. So things like that will serve you very well. I love that you're doing this freehand symbol. I don't stop doing that. Just keep refining it, right, with those techniques that I mentioned. So A+ for painting bravely. I dig the heck out of that.
And I noticed as well, Dejan did a nice sharp job of that power sword too, with his crackling lightning.
Oh yeah, sure, yeah.
Yeah, so he's got it in him, I think.
Absolutely. All right, so with that, we will stop sharing here. And Kieran and I are going to go grab a coffee, get a shower, maybe take a nap, and then we'll come back and we'll finish up the rest of the month. So see y'all in just a moment.
And we're going to get our token dog shot.
There you go. Aw.
There he is. He's already ahead of us on the nap train. So we'll get there.
Adorable. All right. Back in a moment. All right. We're back and all refreshed. And this time, Mr. Stonemonk's with me. Hey, buddy.
I'm still Kieran. I just switched suits.
Oh, good call. Yeah. It's a heck of a change of clothes. Good haircut there. I like it.
Hey, thanks.
You got hair. Nice
Ditto.
choice.
Wait.
Yeah. All right, so we're just going to jump back into it here, pick up where we left off. Share up here. Is that coming through okay?
I'm seeing stuff. Wait a minute. What am I seeing? Yes, I'm seeing an assassin.
That's right. So he had some questions about some non-metallic metal. So why don't I tackle this guy? I mean, it is a Skaven rat. I feel like I know this guy quite well.
Yeah.
Love this model. If you want to take this, or if I'll take this one, if you want to handle then our next one, which is this nice little mini, almost diorama on a model there of the Warhound. Sound good?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
All right. So let's take a look at this guy. Obviously, this is our old buddy Deathmaster Snitch. And the question here was, he said it's his first attempt at NMM. And this is the area where he could use some helpful critique. And he also wondered if the color composition was interesting. Okay, so let's talk about that. So on this guy, what I notice here, so we got NMM in two areas, and we actually have two separate challenges with the two NMMs, the blades and then the bracers, okay? So on the blades, the answer is it's not really effective because you have way too much black. Now, I understand you were going for like less reflective blades, I assume, right? You wanted them to be darker because they're like assassin's blades is probably your thought. That's fine. They're still not going to read as metal if you go too much into the black like this. Your answer would be use a dark color. If you want them to look poisoned, take like a dark green and make it most of this and only keep black here. In addition, when you go to the white, it has to be pure white. Like this edge line needs to be a pure white reflection line. It can be small. It can be this much of it, like the tip of this little finger on the screen is pure white, but it's got to be pure white. And you want to kind of like this area is a little broader. It should just come to a brighter top. Same here. Like this sword is a little better than this one, which is too dark. But you want to extend that out. You're definitely going dark enough. But as always, you can keep your blend short. You can work colors in. And that's fine. You can have a very thin volume of the pure white, but it has to get up to it. Or something real darn close on steel. Now, on the gold, we have kind of a little bit of the opposite problem. So here I need to see some darker colors here on the lower part of this one where it's very in-shadowed and maybe like creeping up like that. Okay. Like maybe this is all deeper shadow. But then I need a little more push into the ivory here to kind of like really show me the reflection points. With all these edges, many of these would be highly reflective. They don't need to go into pure white. When you're doing gold, you can stay in a, you know, kind of ivory yellow, and that's fine, or an ivory ochre. But you should have a couple light blings of pure white, maybe across the top here, like a white dot here, white dot here, white dot here, white dot here, and maybe here like white dot, white dot, white dot, white dot, to kind of show me the edge reflection, right? In general, you kind of want to hit these edges as well a little more with your brighter color. So like all of these standout runes and these edges should be that like ivory / ivory ochre mix color, something like that, depending on how bright you want to go. But then you want the pure white, again, just reflection points. They can be very, very small. You just want a little touch of that. Overall composition, it's tough. The figure's very dark. I do like that you tried a little bit of OSL here to add a little green. That's nice. You want to kind of weaken this a little and smooth it out more. Like you need to get more into a glaze of it fading off. It just kind of drops suddenly. And you want to have a little more of that smoothed out, as opposed to just being so strikingly strong here and then fading into nothing. So weaken it and extend it is my answer there for your OSL. Beyond that, I mean, I think it's fine. This guy's generally can be a, you know, he's a little ninja, so you can keep him in black, and that's fine. I think with his flesh tone and stuff, that'd be okay. You could also pop the green on the edges of the blades a little bit, and then with this green in the center, you'd have a nice little color triangle, kind of no matter what angle you were looking at, that would work a little better. So there you go. That's my feedback for you. Very cool though. Your rat skin tone looks really nice. The shading on the black is very gentle, which I enjoy. You kept it looking black, like he's wearing black. Cool. Got it. You didn't over highlights. I think all that works really, really well. Alrighty.
Yeah.
Let's talk about a fire chaos warhound guy.
Yeah. So Marco reveals that this is a lot of firsts for him, and so he's kind of a beginner. His first time converting, his first time modeling some of that gore and stuff. He's working on some tips that either he's gotten in the past or he's heard us give. There's his dappling on the horse, the kind of patterns on the horse, etc. And he's working on his photography. Now, we always praise when we can get a photo of multiple poses in one frame.
A+ on that.
Yep. So you get extra points. You get a point for each of the firsts that you did. You get another point for this photography, letting us see a bunch of different angles in one shot. And what I'd like to say is that there's a lot of stuff that you pulled off really well. The horse patterning, for example, is fantastic. This horse probably reads as one of the most real things here, which when you can anchor any kind of miniature or diorama in something real and give it some realism, it makes the crazy stuff stand out more and even feel more acceptable. So the horse there is the coloring is great. The saddle to the blue cloth, etc. A great job on the modeling and doing some of that stuff in there. And this particular, I'm not a big fan of these particular Chaos Hounds, but what you've done here in this kind of pose and stuff actually makes them look pretty, imposing and gives them good scale, etc. So there's a lot of things you did very well, very, very well. Color choices are great all around. I like that the kind of the fiery mane of the Chaos Hound. The things that I would point out, one with the horse, even though I've seen some models like this, it does look like maybe on the back of the legs, we could do a little bit more shaving of mold lines. I think I'm seeing kind of really bright white, which is usually a catch, like if you're doing any kind of brushing or that sort of dry brushing or stuff, it seems like that's catching. And I can see the kind of the mold line down the back of the horse. if you take a little bit of green stuff, even like the liquid green stuff, or even if you just were to take your plastic glue and run a bead of that down the middle there, let it soften up, and take your scraper and kind of use the plastic to smooth it. You could use green stuff. There's a lot of things to do to kind of fill in that space. That would be a good thing. So prepping your models, making sure that you get all those things that you don't want to worry about later, or things that kind of accidentally get revealed later when you put washes and that sort of stuff on it. The fire on the beast you did a fantastic job with the blend. I am a huge fan of blending anywhere you can from one color to another. I'm not as big a fan of the black. I know that you go from the hot, which is the yellow, up to the orange, which is great, and then the red, and then sometimes it goes to black. But I think the fur is too short for that. That you probably wouldn't. The fire's not traveling far enough, and maybe it's not hot enough to go to black. But in the end, I think with this much fur, this much detail, the black just kind of muddies it. So I'd probably move away from the black and keep it kind of pop into the red. The only other thing, the face and the hindquarters, I think you could take those up a notch to a color. So like the hindquarters, you're using kind of more like a camel fur kind of color. I think you could go brighter there, so that if you look at the lower left hand from that angle, you see that bright mane. But I think being able to kind of pick out the top of his leg and the top of his kind of haunches would be really good for, this is one of the main angles you're looking at the model. So bringing some attention there, giving the eye some travel to some bright spots there. The face, again, we don't have any straight on of the face, but the top left one, we can see that it gets into a red, and I think you could, or kind of a reddish pink. It looks maybe similar to the red on the entrails. I think you could just go maybe a little bit. This one's interesting. I think you could probably go darker around the mane where the fire is, and then pop it a little bit lighter towards the end of the nose. I also think you could go darker on the entrails and get some more shadow, get some more. If you can go pick up any blood for the blood god, that'd be a perfect place for something like that, and it would work really well on top of the color that you already added to it. Other than that, I think all of these firsts have paid off. You've done a great job. Looking forward to seeing more from you in the future.
Right on. Okay, so next up, we've got. I would love to take this girl, the commissar. If you will take this orc boy on his wyvern.
Yeah.
So I love this this commissar. I thought about picking this up myself, but I just had too much on my painting desk, so I was like, okay, I'll wait. So let's take a look here at James and kind of give some feedback on what we've got. Let's go ahead and try to make that a little larger. There we go. Nope, I made it a little larger. Excuse me. Okay, so I'm just going to kind of cycle through here. Obviously, again, we have lots of non-metallics on display. So, and we've got some texturing on the cloth and stuff, things like that. So there's a lot I like here. A couple things I note. One, on the steel, I think, James, I would like the steel a little better if it, one, had a few points where we went a little brighter, and two, if we had a bit of a color reflection in there as well. It's a little too gray for me right now. So actually having it work into like maybe a blue tone, like a light blue touch to the steel could be a nice contrast. But even if you worked in some subtle yellows or browns or something like that, that could work too. Same with the gold. The gold, I really like your low tones. I'm just not sure you ever come really high enough. I'm not sure it ever really pops up to a bright enough white to really make it stand out in that small scale. On the sword, I feel like we've got way too much in black. Like, I understand I assume your theory of the case here is, well, this sword is pointed away from the light. But like, that's steel doesn't get this. If this is steel, it's going to catch a bunch of reflected light from the ground. So like, yes, this top part should be brighter because the reflected light's going to pass down, hit, bounce up and gather at the top. So like I agree with that. But in general, this part here should have some kind of middle on it. Much like last time. I mean, like at this point, let me put it this way. See how you've done the hat? This hat is more reflective right now, is what you're telling me, than this sword. Than this sword. Excuse me. Okay. And that seems problematic because this is metal and this is probably like, you know, I don't know, leather or something. I don't know. I don't know what commissar hats are made out of. Some kind of not metal.
Right.
I assume. That being said, I really like the texturing on the cloth. I think that looks really well. That sells. Your red color is very nice, very rich, wonderfully desaturated in the shadows. Everything here is like so super cleanly and wonderfully applied. I actually really love how you handled the highlighting on the black leather. I think that sells. Like this, I buy completely. So this is like the boots and probably like the visor and stuff like that. I'm in for that, man. You've got me on this. Like 100%. I dig. I'm picking up. I'm buying what you're selling. Okay. Yeah. Like this is great. They read as shiny black leather. Dig it. So it's really just popping this gold a little more. So it feels a little more reflective. And then really kind of, we want to get like less of this just raw blackness into the sword. That's so far extended. It feels a bit too much. So that's my thoughts on that. But overall, this was a super great piece. So thanks for sharing it.
Yeah.
All right.
All right. Yeah. So Chris has been watching your videos, Vince, and trying to do his best to follow them, kind of up his game. In this case, he's using a lot of dry brushing and glazing to kind of bring things together, blend them, kind of smooth things out. What I really like here, especially, is kind of where the kind of darker oranges fall into the recesses of the wings, and that really pops for me. And there's a lot of very nice natural kind of coloration. It's not like hard line, hey, this is orange, this is yellow, this is orange, this is yellow, which can look great too. But in this case, I mean, it makes for a very natural kind of transition. Where I would then recommend is that there are some cases in which you need to force that a little bit more. So for instance, that kind of membrane between the top jaw and the bottom jaw that you often see in dinosaurs, that could be broken up with that kind of darker orange color. On his claws, kind of, or his front legs, the you know, between the knuckles or whatever, you know, there would be another place where it'd be nice to see that. Maybe on his eyes or around his eyes. Again, kind of those are other recesses in which that can be kind of applied. And if we turn, if you go to maybe the next, it's one of the side shots. Well, let's go a little further there here. And you can see on both sides. Now, I'm also one who sometimes doesn't paint the bottom of my miniatures because you can't see it. So why should I put that work in? But in this case, you can see the bottom of these wings. And so some of these membranes should also kind of be that orange in order to bring that more of that color and that division between what is, you know, kind of claw or finger and which is membrane. And you can see here too, where if I'm looking at that face, some orange in that membrane between the jaws, some orange up in the eyes would really break that up. The other thing that I would, one of the things he asked about is basing. How'd I do? There's some really good basing on here. If this is something that's kind of new for you to build that up, etc. The bark is, this kind of pine bark is a really great tool for that sort of thing. You've done a great job of kind of blending it into the dirt, adding a lot of different sizes of tufts, etc., and put them around different places. So I think that looks really good. The blue armor is sitting pretty flat, and that's not. And it kind of, the armor on the dragon, the armor on the cloth, or the blue cloth, the armor on the orc, all of it's kind of feeling like it's the same material. And right now in my head, I'm feeling like the foam that people use for cosplaying. So I think you could use some of the same dry brushing techniques on those to kind of bring it brighter at the top, darker at the bottom. And then, you know, beat it up, add some nicks and cuts and scratches into it. because the main body of the dragon has a lot of that kind of detail and the pits and the cracks, etc. Bringing some of that to the armor, scratch it up, ding it up, line highlight it with some brighter metallics or something to that effect, and see what you can cause there. So those would be some tips I have for kind of pushing this if you wanted to take it further.
Right on. Okay. So let's see. Next up, we've got this guy, what is this guy's name? He's the Custodes master, but I can never remember this guy's name. And up here, we've got some Sylvaneth. How about I take Mr. Custodes if you want to take our tree folk friends? Sound good?
Mm-hmm.
All right. He said he's waiting on the base to get delivered, so we won't hold that against him. And let's take a look here at what we've got as far as our photos go. Okay, so we'll just kind of scan through here, look at some different elements. All right, so just a couple thoughts overall. Color wise, I like him. Things like the lion look pretty good. The symbol on the back, etc. I think my main critique for you on this guy is just going to be pretty simple, which is, it's funny. There you go. See, that's always a nice sign. I like it when Facebook recognizes a face. That's a sign you've painted a pretty good face, right? That's always a funny thing that happens. Okay, so just a couple quick thoughts for you. Overall, I think your colors work. I think he's nice. I think that the steel could use a little more contrast. It's such an overwhelming part of this guy that bringing up some of the steel, and bringing down some of the shadows. So more tonal variation across the steel, especially here in the middle on this big plate, his feet up here in his chest on the shield. We could push some of this quite deeper into shadow and through the use of some, careful inks and stuff like that, and some more bright silvers to really pop the edges and things like that. I just feel like it would really help the overall piece. Same kind of with the golds. You've got some nicer shadow in the gold. They go a little bit deeper into shadow. I feel like we could just have some more, perhaps, highlights on that to really show some more life to that and more light reflection where it's catching. My biggest challenge for you, though, is just going to be on the smoothness of the overall application of stuff. You have some pretty striking blends, but they're pretty chunky here, on the cloth and stuff like that. On the feather, it completely makes sense. It's feathers, and you tend to have these striations. I think those look really good. That looks rougher intentionally. It's good texturing. The cloth, however, feels like it should be soft. And we can see these really hard transitions in between the colors here. So some subtle glazes and stuff will probably smooth that out. Same with some of the lines on the face here. We'd probably want to smooth some of that down. But overall, I very much like your color choices. We just need to smooth them out a little. Speaking about the axe, this is the other thing I noticed. This is a very cool effect. I totally get what you're going for, the sort of power weapon, lightning dancing across the thing. If we're going to go for this, though, it's got to be smoother than this. So this looks like we took normal paint out of the pot or out of the bottle, and we just kind of tried to apply it directly on here. And what happened is we got thick and chunky, right? So what we need here, if we're going to try an effect like this, is we need two things. One, we need an ink, and two, we need some flow improver. Because you need to get a sharp brush, and you need to be able to trace these lines micro thin. They need to be heavily, heavily pigmented so that they cover strong and sharp without running. If you go and watch my video on painting sharp, thin lines, you'll see where I talk about this, the combination of ink and flow improver into your paint to get those nice, strong, clean, sharp lines. Okay. And taking that will make this lightning look a lot cleaner, and that will really take this effect up to the next level. So that's my biggest sort of piece that I noticed with that one. But overall, I think this guy looks very good. He's certainly worthy of his role here. I think he looks pretty great. I especially do like how you handled the feathers and the colors. I think they're a nice balance, blue and orange, nice mix of hot and cold. I think the lion looks really great. He's a great model. Well done. Okie dokie. Let's talk about some Sylvaneth.
Yeah, so the main concern here was whether or not he was pushing the skin tones enough. Now, I'm going to say, if you're asking the question, it's probably the case. If you're feeling like it may not be pushing into bright enough spots or dark enough spots, you're probably right. In this case, I think
Yeah.
What's that?
No, I agree. I want to say something real quick because I totally agree with that. One of the best reflexes you can develop as a miniature painter, this is broad and across the board. This is something I had to spend a long time on. Listen to that voice in your head. Period. That voice in your head is right in this regard. Like if it tells you this doesn't look right, don't make your conscious mind crush that down and go, no, it's fine because of this and this, and I'll justify around it. Nope. Listen to the voice. The voice is right. I mean, unless it's telling you, like, you know, do something evil to your neighbor. Don't listen to the voice then. Listen to the voice about
if it's saying nice things, listen to the voice.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Trying to hurt you or anybody else.
Don't listen to the voice.
Yeah, don't listen to the voice. So yes, and here's the other thing is, I mean, I think especially with miniatures, especially tabletop, as far as you can push it, if there's room to push it, you should. Because that brings brightness, it brings a lot of dynamics, it makes the detail more clear, and so it's always a good thing I think in miniature painting to push those dynamics. Even when you're going for really gritty things, you might not push that contrast in every given spot, but across the miniature, you have all the darkness and all the lightness. Excuse me. So the pink skin in particular, there's definitely room to go brighter, and you could do that with, an airbrush. I would probably approach it with a brush. Even on the head, being around bald heads, it can be really kind of nice to be working on kind of a round surface and try and create that kind of roundish highlight, blending down to kind of where you're at now. And it's not that difficult. It's as a lot of people say, you kind of get some light on there, or you get some, you get your paints thinned down, or in the case of the white spot at the top, you might use that right out of a pot or right out of a less thinned down area, and you just move the paint around and see where it goes. Same with, in this case, the claws are the other thing that you want to kind of really pop. So go to white or go to a very light pink in the claws and blend down. And yes, the pink, you get the purple in the recesses, but there's a lot of pink in between your mid-tone and the purple. So, find that contrast. And I would say, even if you found I don't know if Corellian red, or is there a crimson wash that GW makes?
Carrienberg Crimson. Yeah,
which might work better than the purple in this case, because that's going to pull some of that pink into like some reds. And then you could do maybe a spot wash of the purple in the deepest spots. So things like that would give you some mid-tones or some deep mid, and then you'd have your purple for your deep. So definitely there. Same with your trees and the branches. Stuff at the top could get lighter. What was interesting is if we pan through here, I guess the other comment on the pink is that if we go to the next one, I think we've got the other revenants or the whatever. The hair shouldn't be pink. It's an opportunity to just add more color, to add something different, to bring that contrast. And so take that opportunity, take that hair and let it be something different. Even if it's more like the tree stuff or green or mossy or whatever, that's fine. And actually, as you are coming through here, your greens are kind of subtle. You can go further with the greens. And in fact, you've got a lot of different colored flowers on the bases. I'd tone that down a bit, kind of pick what you want to kind of offset to. And in fact, one of them I think had yellow on it, and I really thought that taking that green up to a yellow or incorporating more of kind of a mustard color yellow would work really well with the pink. And so if you've got some yellow flowers and you wanted to work with that, you wanted to take your your trees up to kind of a mustard yellow, or like blonde wood, that sort of thing. That could look really striking next to the pink. So, So yes, trust your gut. Push that contrast as far as you can in as many places as you can, and these guys will really stand out on the table. Thanks for submitting these.
Right on. Okay. So next up, moving on. All right. Oh, here we've got a bunch of Nurgle boys, big old Nurgle boys, and Cosimo brings us brings us our little, or you know, one of Iron Skull's boys here, Iron Skull himself.
Yeah.
All right. Well, which one would you like?
Well, I'm happy to take the Nurgle if it makes you feel better.
You read my mind. Okay. So, Cosimo, let's talk about this guy. He said he already posted or removed the post because he's made some last minute changes to the base. Okay, cool. And then, so this is the new version with the base. Okay, so let's take a look. I think I would like him better not on a white background. Let me say that right out of the gate, or with the light turned down a little bit. But okay, general thoughts. He looks really good. I'm not sure the display base is adding too much to him. If you're going to do a display base, you know, like do it, make some reason for its existence other than just it's a square under him with some additional sand and rocks. I do like that you painted this on the front though. That's good. That's super cool. But just like make this more than what this is. This is, you know, just some sand that you dry brushed. Like that could be more. Okay. Now, as to the execution on the figure itself, there we go. Nice little close up. Yeah, I think this looks really good. There's some good stuff going on here that I want to talk about. Your use of contrast in the armor is really nice. You got some nice deep shadows here, here, here. I really like that. They're brought up to a real nice highlight where we're popping to the yellow and stuff like that. So I dig all of that. The gold needs a little bit more of the high white yellow tone in some places, and probably a little bit darker in some others. Like we need a little more broad contrast there. You also want to see something more dark around the rivets. So that is to say, like, make sure each of those get picked out a little more cleanly. I love that you worked colors up here into the steel. I can see the hint of purple and green in here and stuff like that. Yes, muy bueno. That is wonderful. Very, very good. I dig that all day long. The face is probably the area where we could do the most improvement. It's really the center point of this figure. And, you know, you've got it coming up here to some yellow, but I would love to see the inclusion of like a little bit of reds or pinks to center that back in the center. Could be more around this scar. Like you have the scar red, but then it just abruptly stops. The nose, the lips, stuff like that. The teeth could have a little bit more transition to them. Some of these teeth are quite stark. And I think just seeing some deeper shadows here in some areas of the face to really make it a higher contrast. Like I like the climb to yellow. That's nice for your highlight. That's good. I have no problem with that. It's a little more working more interesting tones into the face, more contrast into the teeth, into the sides and hidden areas of the face here. And the say would add a lot more life to this in the same way that you hit hiding these colors up here in the blade did a lot of work there. So that's my thought. On the cloak, I like the effect. That's cool. Nothing wrong there. Nice little simple because his cloak doesn't actually have all them stitches in it. So that's good. Dig that. That looks fine. All in all, I think this dude looks quite good. I think he's a really nice take on this guy. One thing you might want to think about is also a little more micro scratching or paying attention to a little more micro detail. Like there are some dents and more rivets in his armor, and some of these aren't quite as picked out as they could be. So you could do a little bit of work with them. Maybe a couple scratches on his fists where he's had to get in there and just, you know, get punching. Stuff like that generally really helps sell orcs and orcish. Like, you know, the fact that these guys are just constantly in combat and never really take time to get their armor back up to new. So just a thought.
Yeah.
All righty. Nurgle's boys.
All right. So he thanks, Thomas thanks you for the bronze. Some tips you may have given him through some videos and whatnot on the bronze. And he's apologizing because the photography didn't pull out the flesh well enough, the colors and stuff that he's got going on there. So he asks us to ignore those for now, and we'll respect that. But his biggest kind of concern is the armor. Is it going to look metallic on the table? And then he's also kind of looking for help with colors to help kind of just bring things together and you know, add some more weathering and what has he done so far. So looking at this, I think, yeah, the bronze, there's some really nice coloration in the bronze. And when you look at some of those shields, the weaponry, there's a really good job of kind of with the rust tones, looking very dried out and flaky and that sort of thing. So I think, you know, you've got some great colors there. the question on weathering the bronze, I think there's obviously, like nitrile oxide and stuff that can go in those recesses to help kind of pull those out, kind of get into the detail, show that those that particular type of metal has weathered and aged and tarnished. And that could actually work really well with the green that you've chosen. Your green kind of moves from a forest green into some kind of close to a turquoise, but not quite. And that nitrile would kind of go more into that turquoise, so that could look really good. I was thinking that you've done a great job in the armor of going from really darks to really lights, and usually that's what you need to make it feel more metallic, feel more like it's got a shine to it. So there could be a case where you need to go brighter in some of those. Now, you've gone to a white in some of like the chest armor that comes to peaks, and there isn't as much of that in some of the other areas. Maybe similar to the idea of when you kind of scratching off, maybe you could use the bronze to tip the green armor, or you could use a metallic to tip some of those as in the scratches and things that have come off. And likewise, and so you'd kind of get a little bit of a contrast there with the metals. Instead of being green and kind of an orangish metal and being very stark against each other, you would get a little bit more blues, kind of like, let's say 80-20 of the bronze with a little bit of blues in the nitrile oxide. And then you would get, 80-20 flip with the greens with a little bit of bronze. Or I was also thinking you're using kind of this orangish red color. You could push your rust further. And so wherever you have something that has rust, if you could stipple on some of that red, because rust is this interesting weathering that can really take on almost any color. If you in certain tones and you add it to whatever you got, and it just kind of starts popping things. So I could also imagine the pockmarks in the armor having that brighter red tone, not just an orange rust, but the brighter red tones in the rust, and that would really pop those out. It would really kind of get some of that in the recesses. Don't do it everywhere, but just find places where you can pull those colors into the armor and let it play. Let it just. I mean, one of the great things about Nurgle is that it's hard to mess it up. You can just put a lot of different things together, and it just feels like they've just been working together for a long time to make whatever rich color has come out. So, but these guys look fantastic, all of them on the table together. So I want to talk too about Bone and your work there, but I think those are the big ones. Treat that armor a little more roughly, get some other colors in there. Just don't be afraid to steal from the different colors you got going on there and mix them all around. So, yeah, these guys are great.
Right on. Okay.
What we got next, Vince?
Oh boy. Well, next up, Paul Stockey brings us a piece that I've been very keen to review, if you don't mind.
Yeah, no.
And
that means
I'm
I get
sure
Tristan.
that's right. Yeah, his sweet conversion here. This is two winners for me. Okay, so this is a very Paul Stockley is trying to, as he tells us, replicate some different NMM styles. He says, starting with Sergio Calvo. Sure, start with one of the best in the world. Seems easy. Sergio famously did a version of this guy that was just, all in NMM and ridiculous. So you put yourself against a high bar, and nothing but respect for trying that. And what I have to say is you did a real good job of it. Like, I am absolutely thoroughly impressed by this. This came out absolutely wonderful. So Sergio has this sort of Cappy basis style with airbrush glazing and such. And he famously did this piece over a couple videos and things. But you can see it has all these different reflection points, these dirty reflections in it, lots of different light pollution in the reflections, things like that. And I think he did a great job of capturing it here. I mean, I can give you a little micro tips where I noticed some stuff. Like, there should probably be, so like it'd be like the minimalist of stuff. So for example, here in this middle, there should probably be a secondary light pollution reflection here and here that's much more minimal. Up under here, I think there should be one that would then feel like it comes down going into this, and this should be a little deeper shadow and so on.
But I mean, these are like super minimal touches, right? It's just stuff like this. On the whole, I think you really executed this well. You know, most of my feedback would be just these tiny touches. When you're dealing in this kind of like hyper advanced NMM style, it's every little reflection matters. But I think this is just A+ work, man. Like, this is really great. And kind of look at some different angles here.
Yeah.
I think the silver really stands out, as you just nailed it. Where I think I wanted to see a little more is in the gold, honestly. Your gold is still fairly traditionally colored NMM gold. And I think I'd love to see a little more light pollution getting into that. Kind of giving me some more life there. Maybe the gold, like here, picking up some more of the color, or, you know, up here showing me some of this green reflecting up into the reverse reflections of these things. Just super minor touches, I think could bring that gold up to even the next level. But I mean, you know, these are pretty minor touches, to be completely frank. Yeah, on the whole, this looks really great, man. I think you did a wonderful job recreating this. Yeah, I have nothing else to say. It looks wonderful. All your like texture, all the normal stuff is really good. Like your, you know, the things you weren't aiming for, but they're still really good. The texture on the leather and the cloak and the dusting of the edge of the cloak and all these kind of things. Those all look absolutely wonderful. So, you know, very good execution, all that. Very well done, man. You should be very proud on that one. It's so exciting. All right. Let's look at this awesome dude.
Time to grill Tristan. What's fantastic is Tristan keeps surprising us with his Tomb King imagination. I think he wants to ascend above Tyler Mengel for highest Tomb King. And it could happen because this was a really inspired kind of combination that was really cool seeing the progress on. So with that in mind, the things that he says he was trying to do more of, more highlights, I think 4 levels of highlights on the jewels, trying to get a little bit of an inner glow on the scarabs, and incorporate some of the magic on the blades that are being held. I think first of all, the composition is fantastic. You know, that Beetlejuice guy, Ishtar, is I mean, the standalone, he kind of, you know, has his own wave to him and flow to him, which is pretty cool. But then to find kind of that parody and complement in the spirit hosts was just, is really cool. And I think kind of brings this model into Age of Sigmar very well, even though Tomb Kings are dead. But there's a great amount of color. There's a great contrast between kind of the armor that's real and then the other things that are kind of spirited and kind of, you know, amorphous. The glow, if we flip through a couple of the pictures, I think the glow in the scarabs has probably come across of those things is something that just came across a lot better than I expected it to. You know, I think some of that is just kind of playing with it, putting some, you know, pigment down where it makes sense and paint down where it makes sense, and seeing what, not overdoing it. So I think he does a great job of not overdoing it. The spirit hosts obviously look good. I told him that he should make them look more like, I mean, he's been using the Nihilic Oxide, or this scheme for his spirit hosts and other things. But I thought it would look cool too if these were more like sand ghosts. But I think that the color works really well with what he's doing inside the beetles as well. I think the weapons going from kind of a rusty color into the spirit, that may not work as well as you'd hoped. And I think some of that could be maybe there's kind of a really stark transition. If you look at that top one, you can see like exactly the line where those things change. And so if there was any way to kind of transition more slowly, or just fit do that highlight of the ethereal color on the edges, kind of do the edge highlight of that, could work. But otherwise, I would say keep them real, similar to like Ishtar's headdress and, you know, his cowl, etc. Like those things are real, tangible things. So that kind of that real tangible, hard, concrete, metallic thing on top of this writhing mass of beetles is very similar to, you know, a real, tangible, metallic knife being held by a ghostly figure. So I think that contrast works fine. So I would maybe go more towards just leaving them metal. Yeah, these guys look fantastic. I mean, the three faces is perfect, and they look like they're, you know, watch it. You know, they're thinking the same thing and trying to scare the bejesus out of whoever they're attacking, and it just complements itself really well. So nice job on the inspired conversion and really cool execution on some of these. What would be, I would think, to be very difficult things to execute with the beetles. So
Yeah, you don't think Tristan wants some Tomb Kings models, do you?
I think he's yeah. I don't want to comment on that disorder.
Okay. All right. So this is a thing you're going to have to comment on. I'm going to make you go twice in a row here because this tree is a thing I can't handle.
Yeah.
Can't do it. So the tree is all yours, and I have a particular love of Ganassi. And so you know, I've played many a Ganassi in my day. And so I will happily, and I love this Bretonnian figure he based on. So I'll happily take that one if that's okay. I'm going to click on this and then look away from my screen so you can comment.
All right. So Brandon is got a lot more time on his hands to do some painting, is trying to take this to the highest level that he can. And he's looking for some feedback. I will say, in terms of some of the photography, I think we've got some things that are blown out a little bit. So it's hard to give you really strong feedback on some areas. The very first thing I'd say, though, I mean, what's very obvious is that you're doing some great clean blocking. You know where colors are being used, what things are what, and I think that you've made some really good color choices with your greens, with your kind of light flesh tones, with some of the oranges in there, and then the bronzes next to kind of the darker browns, etc. So I think you've got some really good color choices. Excuse me. And so all of that is going really well. You know, my eyes moving around, I'm looking at different things, and that's great. As I'm looking at some of the kind of, let's see, what number? If I'm looking at the second and third picture, which I'm not going to make Vince go to if he doesn't, or maybe he's all right. I can see some mold lines, and I can see some gaps that need filling, etc. All of those things are really good things to work on with as you're prepping for taking a model. If you want to really put your best into a model, make sure you take the time to prep it, because you're going to get to the end and you're like, oh man, I did my best blending or stippling or dry brushing on this, but oh look, there's this line that's running through it and I can't do anything about it now because it'll mess up my paint. So for instance, on the bell here, I can see that on the tree limb, you can see a mold line, etc. And we're putting, I mean, Vince is probably going to retch here in a second by making him do all that. So, you know, just take the time there. I'm also seeing that, like on the bells and the metallics, and like on the trees, I think washes are probably your next step to try and bring some of these things to life. Now, please don't wash this whole thing in one color. You know, you can be using you could be using some red washes in some of those light flesh areas, the tubes, etc. You can be using some green washes, but you can mix that up too. You could be using red washes on that kind of green bark in the symbol of Nurgle. You can be using some red washes on the bell instead of Agrax. You could be using some green washes on the tubes, etc. There's a lot of different ways you can go with that, and that'll just help you kind of bring that contrast. And finally, I mean, the thing that everyone, the goal is to get that contrast and bring things to life. And so, especially on the kind of these light fleshy things, that you're bringing those up to some highlights. You know, that you could be, those are some areas where you could also be doing some freehand if you had any kind of patterning, some spotting, or stripes or any other kind of things like that. They don't have to be solid color. The same with, I guess those are the best things, but even like the tree itself, the branches, you know, those could be going up into some other colors and that sort of thing. So like I said, you got great blocking. I think you want to shade some things down or add some color to it with some different shades, and then work on your highlighting. See what you want to start with. There's a lot of things on this model to play with. There's a lot of different textures, and all of that is just a playground for trying new things and testing new things. So yeah, I would say just kind of push it further that way. And it sounds like you've got a little bit more time on your hands for it. So I hope that also keeps you engaged and interested in the model by trying new things. So thanks for sharing this with us.
Right on.
Sorry, Vince.
It's all right. People paint those trees sometime. What can you do? All right. So this is Azure, his water Ganassi, or the water Ganassi druid. It's her, obviously. And this is obviously the Bretonian damsel, which she says was, her husband had from like 10 years ago. So everything got stripped and then painted it back up. Said she's a total beginner, first serious mini painted, only used watercolors paints, and the mini had previously had zenithal on it. I still haven't put any matte finish on it. Haven't put her on a base yet. Okay. So let's go over this. You picked a real challenging one for your first mini, by the way.
Go big or go home.
Yeah, I guess. This one I always found. Yeah, sure. I mean, so let's start at the beginning. For your first mini, yeah, this is a great job. I mean, excellent work. You're using watercolors to their fullest advantage here. I can see lots of nice blending going on throughout. The purple and the blue and the green and the hair all work well together. So I'll kind of break this down into some contingent parts and give you, since you're just starting out, I don't want to overwhelm you. Like, I'll say right out of the gate, this is a very strong piece for your first one. I mean, like, crazy strong. So you're doing very well. All right. Now, the dress looks really nice. This is the kind of highlighting you want to see. As is usual with purple, we have some rough blends here. The way to get rid of this is to take your lower tone, work it into a nice thin glaze, and smooth the edges down. So that's a simple thing you can do just to get that kind of fixed up there. What I actually want to give you some feedback on is really, and sort of challenge you, because I think you've absolutely got some amazing chops here. It's just on two simple things. Okay. So the first is on your skin. She's got this nice light blue skin. Oh, there you go again. Knows its face. Even with something like a water Ganassi, right? There would still, we still want to bring some other tones into the face. So like using some crimson glazes or something in the cheeks here or here around the eyes could be nice, because it also makes the piece feel more feminine. Again, I'm not saying you got to make her look like she's wearing a ton of makeup or anything, but just adding life to it. And we read reddish colors as life, even though she's, not a human being. That is to say, she's, part elemental. Still using a little bit of those tones very subtly will make it feel like she's alive. So I would challenge you to work some more of that, like crimson or purple or something, into your blue paint. It'll actually come out a little bit purplish, but it'll be a very different purple than what your dress is. And it would make the sort of skin feel more alive. But your blending on the skin is expert. Her face is very nicely highlighted. So I really like that. The other thing I'm going to challenge you on here is the blonde hair. This is the part, I think, the only part that really lets me down, because it's quite uniform throughout. So with the blonde hair, first of all, again, amazing chops that you did not go yellow. Most people, when they're first starting out and they paint blonde hair, especially new miniature painters, they use yellow. You didn't. You didn't go like sun yellow. Kudos. Okay. But we do need a little bit of ochres and we need a little bit of ivories in here. And we want to create some more separation in the hair. So I want you to work on sort of darkening down some areas with maybe some sepia tones, where blonde hair typically will fall into sort of sepias a little bit when it becomes enshadowed. It'll bring that that sort of brown tones into it. And on the highlights, I'd like us to catch some more of this where the hair goes thin toward the edges, things like that, with maybe a little more of an ivory mixed in here so we can get some more highlights into the hair. The hair is such a major feature on this model. She has this beautiful, long, flowing hair, and that could really help really help give it the same level of variance. Like in a point of fact, right? Assuming her hair is made of the same stuff as human hair, which I'm just going to hope it is. I don't know what Ganassi hair is made of, but let's just say it is. It would have a much higher sheen than, say, the dress or the cloak, unless the dress is like pure silk. And if it's pure silk, then it would have about the same sheen as a human's average oily hair, right? So we would want to see the same contrast of tones. My advice I've always given in the past is just, and it only works for like the top of the head, because I don't think you're gonna see much of it go down this big, is look at like a hair dye, like the front of the box for hair dye for like blonde hair or whatever. It's like find the color you're trying to match, because they like make it Photoshop perfect. So they create these like perfect light sort of halos and stuff that just don't exist in real life. And that's fine, but it still tells us where sort of the light should fall and can be a good sort of roadmap for you to follow. So bringing some more of those ends up in light, I think would be a great move there to help, again, continue to differentiate that. Some sepia tones in here, here, and here, and a little more white, like along these edges. Not white, ivory, because we want to stay in a warm tone, right? And maybe a little around here, and then kind of blend that down into your straw color here. But overall, this is absolutely fantastic work for your first finished mini. So, I mean, A+, keep painting. Well done. Freaking well done. This is a very complex model to start on, and you did a great job. All right. Hey, how about it's my turn to keep talking?
Yeah.
Because I'll take Mr. Rat if you want to take the fiery spooky ghosts.
Now that Fiery Spooky Ghost is April 1st. Do we want to cut it off, or do you want me to?
Well, this is the March one, so they both posted here,
Okay.
even though they were a little late. So we'll keep going. So we got two April 1st. We'll talk through real quick.
Sounds good.
All right. So, okay. He said Lauren tells us he's reworking his Skaven army. And so he just kind of wants some general thoughts on the aspects of the units. So I'm going to move through this quickly and just kind of talk about like what would I work on, and do I think everything here works from the general color scheme. So let's take a look at this. We'll just kind of scan through the pics when I get back around with the boss. All right. So general color scheme, the green and the blue. Yep, everything there works. My biggest push for you across all of the minis is we need a little more variance on the Caucasianish flesh tone you're using for the non-furry parts of the rats, especially on the characters, right? So like if you're going to do a warlord like this, there should be some reds and stuff in here, right? Where these things have a little more life. So we need to, take some Reichland flesh shade or something like that. And just, you don't need to wash the whole mini, just very carefully apply it. I understand we're dealing with a big Skaven army, so we're not wanting to spend a lot of time, but when it gets to characters, you want to spend a little more. Same here. Maybe, like all their skin looks pretty flat, like this part of the skin, right? So let's add a little more color into that. Now, as far as the rest of it goes for your rats, I think it's looking really good. You've got nice color worked into your steel of this like brown rust. You should work some freehand stuff around. I think the blue and green works really well. I have no problem with any of that. I think the real area that jumps out at me, you can see a lot from when you look at above, right? How flat a lot of this stuff looks. And so I think using some careful Reichland flesh shade, maybe Reichland with a little seraphim, maybe applied both. You can play around experimenting. Lots of different ways you could do it. That's what would be my major challenge for you, because most of what else I see here, I like. You've got some nice variants. Again, you got so many rats to paint. I'm not going to hit you up and tell you to take everyone up to competition or display level. That's just nonsense. But a little more of that color variance, I think, along that's the basic Caucasian skin tone part, I think will really go a long way for you. As to the other rest of the general composition of the units, it looks good. I think the basing scheme works. I like a little bit of the color being reflected from them down in there. So I think that's fine. Yeah, overall, I think the army will look really nice done up like this. So yeah, good stuff. Your gems and your warpstone and stuff all look really good too.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a warpstone effect across a couple things. That all looks very nice. Keep doing all that however you're doing it. That looks really good. Yeah. I have zero feedback for that because it looks really, really nice. Okay. All right. Fiery spooky ghosts.
All right. First things first, Nick. he painted this since Adepticon. He's a mad person. Completely insane. So, in that regard, welcome. And thank you for going through this paint so we could see it. I love the colors. I love the scheme. I love the fiery take on this, especially given the you've got a lot of the blue contrast, the frosty bases, and the blue cloak. So all that's looking really good. One of his main questions is are the highlights on his cloak, on the cloaks, right? And I think as we get into it, first and foremost, as an army, is this shot here. Everything looks really balanced, and you did obviously do a great job with the blends from the reds to the oranges to the yellows, etc. That fieriness reads really well, and the cloaks really, I think, pop very well next to that, or contrast very well with that. As we get a little bit closer, if we look on the next slide, we do see that I'm trying to remember I don't know what these colors off on hand. Maybe it's Nightshade. Is it Dracoff Nightshade for the what's the Incubi Darkness maybe for the base coat, or maybe you're using one of those new technical paints when this army came out. But I think the highlight is working really well as far as the color, and you've not only used it kind of as edge highlight for some of the cloth or whatever, but it does look like you've used it for some striations, and in general, it kind of looks like the cloth is worn and torn. Now, what's interesting is that, I guess I could imagine too, whenever you're working with the fire, the fieriness, I'm trying to look for like, how is that interacting, etc. There's a couple of textures. I don't know, Vince, if you can go in one or two slides. Let me see on this one. Let's go next, one more. Yeah, I think these guys work. There's a couple of things that I would love to see the fieriness kind of taken further. One, where we have the chainmail over top of the fiery cloth, I would love to see that painted yellow and then very lightly kind of do a black to get kind of the ringlets line highlighted with the black, so we still see the yellow popping through it as if it's glowing through. In this case, seeing kind of silver. Seems like you wouldn't see kind of any kind of silver tone when it's being backlit by such a fiery, bright color of cloth. And so I would maybe do that. Also, the weaponry, I would love to see, instead of this kind of healthy brown, I'd love to see more of like a charred grayish color, or even into the, maybe I don't know if I would say go the blues, but you could certainly do something where if you go a little darker with the wood, char it around the hands or around where the heat is, that's going to help those things pop even more. And I think that would be, just I think a good thing. Here you can also see where, what he's talking about in terms of the highlighting. I like that your kind of brightest blue isn't just going on the, maybe the wrinkles or the ridges, etc., that there's just kind of some random striation coming on the back. It kind of reminds me of how you might do wear and tear on metal, only in this case it's cloth. And so seeing something kind of below that, or kind of seeing through it a little bit. I don't know if maybe that would go into a green color if you got kind of something fiery underneath it. I don't know if that would be too much to try and add that into there. But I think in general, for basically a week off of Adepticon, having painted all this stuff, and with this kind of blending and with these kinds of colors and stuff, this looks really good.
Right on.
And
all right. So let's I agree. It's great. I mean, it's insane work. Okay. So last up, we got an orc boy for kill team from Daniel. Just our happy little orc boy to end out the month.
Just a single orc boy, especially given that we just saw somebody paint a whole army, and this person's like, I just got an orc boy.
Yeah, that's fine. Nothing wrong with that.
Oh, not at all.
So here's some feedback on the orc boy. In general, this is going to be a very common refrain you hear me talk about, and it's just some more tonal variation. Again, like if we're talking kill team, even orcs, you don't need that many orcs. It's like you know what, maybe a dozen works, 15 if you got some Gretchen mixed in, you know, it's, whatever. So, you know, it's not the biggest commitment. It's not, I would understand if you're talking about a giant army, but here, let's, you know, give some more work to pop out the face a little more. Again, like I talk about frequently, working like the pink tones and stuff around the lips, into the nose, very, very lightly, just kind of fade them into that green can look really nice. But having the eye ridges and stuff come out a little stronger. Same with maybe getting some higher highlights out here on the arms. You got some good work. We could push it a little farther, especially head to here. It's more shadows than highlights down on the arms and stuff. The other place I spot a chance where we can really up that tonal variations around things like the metal here. We got a lot of metal that's just kind of steel, and like Orky metal feels like it should have some more color to it. You got a little bit of brown in here, some little more. Work in some different tones, that metal, work in a little brown, little rust, stuff like that. And you know, make this boy look like he's out there. He's been doing some work, gotten hacked up, but overall, cool work, boy.
Very cool.
Okay, that brings us to the end of the month. As always, if you'd like to come join us in the PmP, the Painters Motivating Painters Facebook group, the link is down in the description. We'd love to have you along on the hobby journey. I'll repeat the rules one more time for end of month submission, because we definitely want to make sure that people are following it. Make sure only one submission per person a month, and make sure that you are telling us directly what you want to see us comment on. To that same line, I want to end by thanking everybody who, as we've transitioned this month into Facebook, this has been a month of transition for us away from Google+. I want to thank everyone who's been awesome, still commenting, still interacting, still posting. I've been so happy to see so many people come over from the old community, as well as new people joining. I think that's fantastic. Let's keep the positivity rolling. When people ask questions, answer. You see somebody post something, give them a little feedback, always through a positive lens of how we can continue to grow and take our own next steps on our hobby journey. But I want to thank everybody very much. Eric, any final thoughts before we close out?
No, I mean, yeah, this transition to the Facebook page, you know, and trying to find the right solution. There's some, you know, obviously we've probably lost some people, but it seems like we've also gained some people. And so, yeah, thank you for making that transition, doing something different than we have every month, and still coming out with a really strong, group of minis to oogle over and give some humble feedback to. So thank you very much.
Agreed. All right. And so with that, we will say goodbye. Appreciate you watching, and we'll see you next month.